Hello, Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Shri Vaishnava. Jai Shri Vaishnavi. Just remembered I'm going to continue what I did last time, which is read the literal translation first of all the verses by H.D. Goswami, and then we'll get into Prabhupada because it's really fast. And I have to remember how he does it. So the one is at the end of the verse. Okay, and we're doing chapter 7, verse 24 through 26. Next week, we'll do the final verse cluster in chapter 7. And then the week after that will be chapter 8. But here is chapter 7, verse 24 through 26. Not knowing my higher, ultimate, unchanging nature, the unwise think me a formless existence that takes on visible individuality. I do not reveal myself to all. This confused world, covered by mystic illusion, does not recognize me. Unborn and unchanging. I know the past, present, and future of all beings, Arjuna, but no one knows me. That's it. The next verse cluster is about duality, which is back to basics as far as Bhagavad Gita goes. Let us now bring in the big tamale, the main course, Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Verse 24. Unintelligent men who know me not think that I have assumed this form and personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is changeless and supreme. The Sanskrit verse is much more dense than the English translation here. And there's a long purport for this first verse, which really is the key to the whole verse cluster here. The other two verses are just expanding on this same verse. I don't remember anything new from the next two verses, just kind of extending and elaborating. One interesting word, budhaya. That's what less intelligent persons are. So these are not buddhi. These are not those with buddhi. They are abudhaya. They don't have buddhi, that kind of higher intelligence. The most difficult word for me is the first word, avyaktam, which means non-manifested. I didn't know what that meant because in the word for word translation, it's that these less intelligent people think that Krishna is a non-manifested personality. It's like, what does that mean? It's also confusing because after avyaktam, non-manifested, you get the word vyaktim, which means personality. So there's clearly some wordplay going on there with avyaktam vyaktim. And then in the final line of the verse, there's the end of the wordplay where Krishna says, avyayam, imperishable, avyaktam, avyaktim, and then finally, avyayam, actually, imperishable. And what I learned from the purport is that non-manifested, that word avyaktam is referring to the impersonal nature and what the impersonalists think about Krishna. I'm going to go into my notes here. Now, what this verse is basically saying is that, and I think he's pretty sure he said this before in previous chapters, is that he is rarely understood in full. Krishna has a supreme nature and not just a mundane nature. And in this case, mundane also applies to demigods, because remember, we were just talking about demigods in the previous verse cluster. So if you have a desire for fortune and you worship Lakshmi Devi, she's a great Devi. She's a great demigod, powerful, beautiful, etc. And she can bestow, uncalculable, uncountable wealth that will make you go totally bananas and nuts. But that whole situation is within the realm of the mundane, actually. There's higher mundane and lower mundane, but the mundane is the mundane. I'm being a little mean there, actually. So I should clarify, I'm not talking about Lakshmi Devi herself as much, but more like, I don't know, I guess her dharma. There are probably, compared to us, there is a higher nature and perhaps a changeless nature to the demigods, but only Krishna is supreme. And that word is the word Krishna uses here, param, super or supreme. In the second paragraph of the purport, Prabhupada calls out not just the impersonalists. So first, let me read what Prabhupada says. Therefore, in this verse, it is clearly stated that not only the worshippers of the demigods are less intelligent, but those non-devotees who are engaged in Vedanta and speculation on Vedic literature without any tinge of true Krishna consciousness are also less intelligent. And for them, it is not possible to understand God's personal nature. And the impersonalists, people who believe the absolute truth is impersonal, are asuras. Only the fools regard me as an ordinary person. And as we've heard before and we'll hear again, no one can understand Krishna without rendering devotional service and without developing Krishna consciousness. And specifically, developing Krishna consciousness can only begin when you're given it by grace. It can only come by grace. If you're like me, and you start out in kind of a dry, philosophical, speculative bhav, and then, it says in the Gita to, one of my favorite verses, chapter 9, verse 26, Krishna says, offer me a leaf, a fruit, or flower. And so if you, as a dry philosopher, but with insincerity and with arrogance, say, okay, here you go, Krishna, here's a flower. Let's go. Give me my moksha. Chop, chop. Krishna may not reciprocate with that. But, you have to do whatever you do enough until he actually says, "Oh, who is this guy? I think this guy's for real." And then he'll give you a taste, and then you get to begin the actual personal process of Krishna consciousness. These impersonalists are also known as Mayavadi. All long vowels there. Mayavadi. All long vowels. That's the only word I can think of that has every vowel is a long vowel. And there's 4 vowels and 8 letters in that word. It's wild. Two, three, four. In the 4th paragraph, I think Prabhupada clears it up nicely how that word avyaktam, non-manifested, means specifically Krishna is talking about those who claim he is impersonal and he's just, showing an image of himself or something, and he's not, he's not Krishna. That makes sense. And in verse 23, we learned those who worship demigods go to their planets, and the Lord has his own planet, and we all go to different planets accordingly. And if you're devoted to Lord Krishna, you go to Krishna Loka. And this is clearly stated, but even though that's clearly stated, the foolish impersonalists still maintain that the Lord is formless and that these forms are impositions. Does it appear that the demigods and their abodes are impersonal? From studying of the Gita, clearly neither the demigods nor Krishna are impersonal. They are all persons. Therefore, the monistic contention that ultimate truth is formless and that form is imposed does not hold true. It is clearly stated here that it is not imposed. That's pretty much it. We cannot understand how the Supreme Personality of Godhead can be impersonal. The imposition theory of the impersonalist monist is false as far as the statements of the Gita are concerned. It is clear herein that the Supreme Absolute Truth, Lord Krishna, has both form and personality. On to 25. I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them I am covered by my eternal creative potency, and so the deluded world knows me not, who am unborn and infallible. And in brackets, my eternal creative potency is yoga maya. And that's the word we do see in Sanskrit in the verse. A little bit, about 1 page purport for this verse. And then the next one has a little bit shorter purport. As I said, verse 24 really tells us all we need to know, and then 25, 26 just kind of add to it a little bit. The main key here is as Krishna does not cast pearls before swine, so also we should not. Great wisdom is naturally hidden. So one thing I've learned my whole life, it just it won't take. Doesn't matter. Like you can give it as it is. You can try to give it indirectly. There's many ways you can try to give wisdom that just won't take if people aren't ready for it or don't want it. It just won't take anyway. But there is a chance, as it says in the Christian Bible, that in the gospel books, that if you give, if you give a pearl to a dog or a pig, it won't only reject it, it will reject it and trample on it as well. So got to be careful there. One note for those who are listening more to my vibe than to the actual words I'm saying, which is stupid. I'm a rationalist. You should not worry at all about how I make you feel with my energy, because I'm not even conscious of that. I'm a little conscious, but this is a rational program we're doing here. Same with Krishna. When he makes strong claims that if you do this, this will happen. If you don't do this, nothing will happen. He's doing it like a father for your benefit. He's not just being mean. And so being mean for the sake of mean, I mean, when Krishna says that I never manifest to the foolish, he's not saying that like, oh, the stupid fools, they'll never get me. No, it's like he wants to help everyone. It's not out of spite or hate. It's just they're foolish. So how can we treat a fool as if they're not a fool? That's insincere. There is love there. I guess that's technically speculation on my part. I mean, I could find some other verse to, justify that, but just in case it's not obvious, I have to put in an important caveat there. I did read the purport but I didn't put any notes about it in here. So I'll read a little bit here. The first paragraph gets right to the point and clears up the important issue. It may be argued that since Krishna was present on this earth and was visible to everyone, then why isn't he manifest to everyone now? But actually, he was not manifest to everyone. When Krishna was present, 5,000 years ago, there were only a few people who could understand him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Many people, were just seeing Yoga Maya. They might, considering him an ordinary man. By the way, ordinary man doesn't mean like, lowly street sweeper. You can be like, a great king and still be an ordinary man. He was manifest only to his devotees as the reservoir of all pleasure. But to the unintelligent non-devotees, he was covered by his eternal potency. And in the Bhagavatam 1.8.18, there's an interesting quote here. Kunti, from Queen Kunti, says, your transcendental form is covered by the Yoga Maya. The Brahma Jyoti is the covering of the internal potency. I was thinking, and then she says, may you kindly remove this glowing effulgence that impedes my seeing. Ooh, that's quite a prayer. It's quite a question. We gotta. For me, I'm with those kind of prayers. I got to be careful with what I'm asking for, because Krishna's a good teacher, a good father. He does everything for a good reason, and his Yoga Maya is there for our benefit. And it's like when Arjuna asked to see the universal form, and then it was too much, he couldn't handle it. He said, Krishna, please stop. Please, it's It's too much. Please give me some more Yoga Maya. And Krishna said, of course, that's what it's there for. Oh. So there's a transcendental dance there. Sometimes you want more Krishna, the real Krishna, and you ask for that. And then sometimes you get too much, and then you want more of the illusory Krishna. The impersonal, something, a more impersonal aspect of Krishna is more digestible for us, more perceptible, more tolerable. But eventually then it's not enough, and you have to go back to praying for the more personal, the more real Krishna, closer to the heart of Krishna. And the 15th chapter of the Gita also talks about Yoga Maya. And there's another verse from Bhagavatam 10:14-7, a prayer by Brahma. O Supreme Personality of Godhead, O Super Soul, O Master of all mystery, who can calculate your potency and pastimes in this world? You are always expanding your eternal potency, and therefore no one can understand you. Learned scientists and learned scholars can examine the atomic constitution of the material world or even the planets, but still they are unable to calculate your energy and potency, although you are present before them. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, is not only unborn, but he is avyaya, inexhaustible. His eternal form is bliss and knowledge, and his energies are all inexhaustible. That brings us to verse 26. O Arjuna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me no one knows. So this is a good conclusion to the verse cluster. He's still saying the same thing he said in verse 24. No one knows me. that's the main thing. It's like, actually, no one knows me, and I have a supreme nature. But here, there's a little nice, like rhyming kind of prose and poetics, past, present, future, and all living entities too. And this also goes a bit more into detail on how he's different from the demigods, because demigods do not know all living entities. They know their living entities, Their. They know their living entities that they are working with, dealing with, reciprocating with, and so on. Krishna knows all of them. Do the demigods know all that has happened in all time, in every manifested universe? I don't think so. And once again, we have Prabhupada in the first sentence here talking in the purport how really the key is that it's Krishna's not impersonal, and that's the point to be hammered home, so to say. If Krishna is considered by the impersonalists to be Maya, then he would, like the living entity, change his body and forget everything in his past life. Anyone with a material body cannot remember his past life, nor foretell the future. Unlike the ordinary human being, Lord Krishna clearly says that he completely knows what happened in the past, present, and future. In the 4th chapter, we've seen that Lord Krishna remembers instructing Vivasvan, the sun god, millions of years ago. And we have heard before Krishna telling us that he is the super soul. So, of course, he knows every living entity because he is situated in every living being's heart as the supreme soul. And despite of all that, the less intelligent cannot realize him as the supreme person. Sri Krishna is not perishable. He is just like the sun, and Maya is like the cloud. We can see the sun and the clouds and the different stars and planets. The clouds may cover all these temporarily, but this covering is only apparent to our limited vision. The sun, moon, and stars are not actually covered. Similarly, Maya cannot cover the Supreme Lord. By his internal potency, he is not manifested to the less intelligent class of men. I think Krishna is also hinting that, on how, because he mentioned earlier in this chapter how dear an intelligent person is to him, how a jnani who has knowledge of Krishna and is in devotion and union with Krishna is very dear to him. So by now doing in the negative form, Krishna is telling those who are not intelligent, don't know him at all. Krishna is using that rhetoric to let us know that this is a very excellent bona fide path that is intelligence, coming to Krishna using your intelligence. Math. When you base your life on math, as I do, and many of my coworkers, everyone around me simply does not. They go more on feelings and habits and so on. But when you really do calculations and you base your decisions and everything on rational mathematical calculation, there's a foundation there in your life. Doesn't mean it's perfect, because you can miscalculate and you can get the wrong input data. But if you have, for instance, the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and you're using that as your primary input for your worldview, for your ideology, for your religion, for your science, for your philosophy, for your happiness, for your friendships, then it will eventually, everything will get better, everything is great, yada yada. But it still you still have to practice the intelligence of seeing all these things clearly. And sometimes it just means rereading some things many times. And that's why I'm here, because I'm still practicing, even when I don't have the Gita, when I don't have it in front of me, reading as I am now. I'm practicing all the time, with jnana and buddhi, like taking the worldview, getting worldview knowledge from the Gita and applying it to the world around me, and then buddhi, trying to find, what's the right course of action to stay Krishna conscious as best I can. And there's always been a few key verses that completely justify my life here in Asia, although whatever problems that do happen. But you could also make a claim that some other verses contradicted, and in my own personal situation. But the point is, I'm practicing intelligence, and that's what this live stream is about. You can see me practice intelligence. You can practice with me. You can practice how I do in your life, or you can take one thing I do and change it a little bit to suit your own life. Go for it. That's what intelligence means. It means experimenting, calculating, studying, analyzing based on different things. As it is stated in the 3rd verse of this chapter, out of millions and millions of men, some try to become perfect in this human form of life, and out of thousands and thousands of such perfected men, hardly one can understand what Lord Krishna is. Okay, I was right. So it has been said before in this chapter already. Even if one is perfected by realization of impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma, he cannot possibly understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, without being in Krishna consciousness. So Krishna in this verse says he is the Lord of time and the Lord of all persons. And one example to think about this is if you can imagine a great king or emperor. Does anyone really know the king? Not really, because even his close advisors, they can only guess what's really going on inside the mind of the king. And for good reason. One reason is the king is like always concerned he might be betrayed by one of his close advisors. So he has to play the politics game. I think Prabhupada in this purport is also showing us by how he ended this purport here. I think he's confirming what I've discovered recently is that these chapters go on by verse cluster at a time. And the final part of the purport is really final. It really perfectly ties up this idea. It concludes it so that we know, okay, the next verse we're going to do something a little different, which is true. We'll stop there and we'll see you next week to finish off chapter 7. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila H.D. Goswami. Jai Shri Vaishnava. Jai Shri Vaishnavi. Haribo.